Welcome, everyone, to our episode 1 of Negotiation with Alice Season 2. So I'm really excited to have Elisabeth Stitt here with us today. And Elisabeth will tell you a little bit about what she does. Welcome, Elisabeth.
Thank you. Hi, yes. I taught mostly middle school for 25 years. And over the course of that, began to notice a big change in both kids and parents. And so 10 years ago, I left the classroom and I started Joyful Parenting Coaching, where I give parents of kids of all ages the skills that they need to create happy, harmonious homes and to set things up such that their kids are really thriving, with the ultimate goal of parents finding joy in their parenting. And it's always going to be a demanding process, but I see no reason why it can't be a joyful process.
Wonderful. And so I'm really excited today because normally my podcast is about negotiation just generally. But today we have a special episode because of Elisabeth's expertise and mine. I kind of wanted to meld the two together. And I wanted to talk about negotiating with teenagers and sort of, why that might be important and how to go about doing that. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, Elisabeth, why you might think that parents with their teens might be an important aspect of their, learning.
Absolutely. And I want to start by saying I think that there are lots of crossovers between negotiating with our kids and negotiating with other people. As the parents, you do need to communicate with your parenting partner, but you and your parenting partner do need to start by figuring out what are your non-negotiables and what are you just absolutely not, what can you not budge on? And then let's say teeth brushing, because that's usually most families find that pretty non-negotiable. We will brush teeth in this family. You've got a lot of wiggle room about how and when and where, but the bottom line of we will brush teeth in this family, that's pretty non-negotiable. And I think that's a good model for a lot of the other kind of negotiating that we're going to do with our kids, that where we are super clear about what our bottom line is, first of all, it gives us a certain confidence and a certain authority and clarity that comes through energetically, I believe, with our kids. The gray areas, of course, are the hard ones. How do we, screen time is the biggest, right? Like, might as well just go to the big fish. The big fish is probably, there is not a parent who doesn't say they would like their kids to have less screen time and that they're sick unto death of all the negotiating that the kids do about it. So again, bottom line is when you have a pretty clear sense, and it might not be this is the line, but you need to at least know it's going to be somewhere between here and here. And I am going to hold that as an expectation. And it can look a lot of different ways, right? It could look like, one of the suggestions I give to parents is, rather than focusing on how much you're going to limit your kids' screen time, instead think about what else are you demanding of them? What are you going to have them do before they're on their screen time or in addition to their screen time, so that you're bringing balance to your kid's life? And that can be a really great place of negotiation, because when you bring a lot of limiting energy, then kids want to push back against it naturally, right? And when instead you say, like, yes, I know your screen time's important to you and I want you to have screen time, and I also want you to do these things over here. Let's look at what it's going to be and let's talk about working that out. Then we don't have the charged energy around the screen time. We're doing our negotiating around, how much are you helping around the house? How much exercise are you getting? How much sleep are you getting? How much are you contributing to the community? How much time are you spending? I always like kids to be doing what I call real world things, which is like hands-on. Are you building or painting or knitting or baking or doing a puzzle, but something that is involving your hands?
Yeah, I think that, you hit the nail on the head with the expectations. So in negotiations, I always feel like setting an expectation goes a long way to success. So if you're able to have the conversation prior, so instead of saying, hey, you've been on the computer for way too long, you should get off right now, right? To set the expectation before that ever happens, to say, this is what I expect. I expect, this number of hours on screen time, not to exceed that. I also expect you to do your chores or your homework, or you said outside activities, to set all those expectations prior, because trying to resolve a conflict in the moment without having any expectations set, without having consequences set, it's setting you up for failure, because then there's going to
100%.
be a power struggle and a fight, right? And especially what I always talk about, and you can talk about from your perspective, I think it's always better to lay out consequences before they happen, because if you just come and you go, oh my gosh, you've done this, now I'm gonna punish you and take away X, Y, and Z. If you haven't set that expectation up prior, that hey, by the way, if you do X, Y, and Z, this is what's going to happen, it can be very upsetting for your child. It causes a fight, and now you're in conflict yet again. You want to talk a little bit about how you see that playing out?
100%. And I mean, we know how it plays out. If you, setting expectations, I call the skill anticipation. It's one of my favorite parenting skills. So let's say you haven't done any anticipation, and now you've allowed the child to get 100% fully involved intensely with something, and now you're trying to extricate them from it. You should just expect it to be a hard time, right? Because you have not set your kid up for success, which means you haven't set yourself up for success. And honestly, you're the adult, so that's on you. This is too powerful a force. We cannot expect our kids to be in the middle of a game where they've been playing and focusing. We can't expect them to go like, oh, okay, you think it's time for me to get off now? No way. That just won't work. So let's not talk about that moment. Let's talk about the anticipation.
Yes.
So what are some of the ways that we can anticipate? One is knowing your kid, because some kids can handle more time on screens than others. And so you have more flexibility with a child whose brain is less responsive to the addictive factors of a screen. There are kids, not too many of them, but there are kids in the world who can go like, oh, what? You're going to do what? Okay. And I'll put down my game. But most of our kids are not like that. So you've got the prefrontal cortex that allows you to be observing the child over time and to be noticing. Can they be 30 minutes on? Can they be 40, 45 minutes, an hour before, even if we've set up good protocols, they are not able to handle it gracefully? Okay, if so, then it's your job to insist that there be a break, to pull it back, to divide the time, to set them up for success. Additionally, as you said, you want to have the clear consequences. And it doesn't have to be like, boom, this is the consequence. It can be like we give our little kids the 5-minute warning. You're like, we're going to go, 5-minute warning. Okay, what are you going to do? It's just that you want to negotiate what that's going to look like and sound like. So, you're going to set the agreement. You're going to say, and it might sound something like this. Alice, sweetheart, I notice that really when you're on your device more than like 40 minutes, it's much harder to get you off the device. And honestly, you are less pleasant. So could we agree that after 40 minutes, you're going to take a break and you can come back to it? And you may have the mom that, no, that's ridiculous. After 40 minutes. And so I might be like, okay, let's try it for the week then. How long would you like to be allowed on? And you might as well start with where the kid is there, right? And then let's say they say, I think I should be on, I should be able to be on for like hour and a half. Okay, let's try it. And at the end of the hour and a half, what is it going to look like when I ask you to stop? I don't know. What do you mean? Well, you're saying that an hour and a half would be a reasonable amount of time. I want a reasonable person at the end of that hour and a half. So what can I expect? Well, I don't know. I'll get off. Will you get off with a sneer and a mean comment? Because that's not going to cut it for me. Okay, fine. I'll get off and I'll be nice about it. Okay, so nice would be like, okay, Mom. And then within like 3 counts, I see you in motion towards shutting stuff down. Okay, yes, that is what that means. Wonderful. I'm happy to give you an hour and a half and to see how that works. You're getting an hour and a half. When I remind you, I'm getting an okay, Mom, and within moments, like 1, 2, 3, I'm counting in my head, you are shutting down whatever you're working on. And then I might say, do you need any support with that? Well, what do you mean? Well, would you like a 10-minute warning? Would you like a half-hour warning? Like, are you going to keep an eye on the time? How are you going to know that it's an hour and a half so that you're not angry when I come and I say it's time to shut things down? Okay, yeah, I guess it would be good to give me a 10-minute warning. Okay, I'd be happy to do that for you. We're going to do all of this ahead of time. And then I'm going to say, and I'm so glad that I'm going to get an okay, Mom. If I don't, how do you want me to be about that? Huh? Well, you've just said you're going to say, okay, Mom, so that this is going to be a pleasant experience for me, because it's not fair to take your, video feelings out on me. Okay, I guess if I'm not nice about it, then I shouldn't get screen time the next day. Okay, that sounds fair to me. So what I'm hearing is you get an hour and a half. You're going to be pleasant about getting off. If you're not pleasant about getting off, you lose your screen time the next day. Great. So why would I start with an hour and a half? Because the chances are that if the child really can't handle it, they're not going to be pleasant. And they're not going to say, okay, Mom, and turn it off. They're going to say, let me just have one more thing. And I'm going to say, remember our agreement? So I'm hearing you arguing. And so no screen time tomorrow. And now we're going to get to the end of the week. They may have lost their screen time every other day, because every other day they haven't managed to say, okay, Mom, and they'll be off their screen. So now you are in a great bargaining position to come back and to say, my observation is that this did not serve you, because you lost your screen time, half your screen time this week, and you were really mad at me. So I would like to propose that, we try 45 minutes, a break, and you can go back and have another 45 minutes. What do you think?
That's excellent. I think those are really great examples of how to negotiate. And sometimes people might think, well, that just takes too long. But in reverse, if you don't do that, take the time to have that normal and civil conversation, you end up having twice as long of an argument afterwards, where people are yelling and screaming and slamming doors and people are angry and there's power struggles and it's all a big mess. So taking that time before anything happens is really critical in having a good negotiation with good outcomes, and also keeping the peace in the house. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And peace in the house is very valuable. I mean,
Yes.
it's not worth getting peace by just giving in all the time, because what we know is that ultimately that doesn't give us peace. And it is a mistake to get peace in the short run at the expense of getting it in the long run, because the long run is much longer.
Yes. And the
Yeah.
other thing that I like to talk about, there are some old school parents who are like, I'm the parent, and so whatever I say, that has to be the rule. But where I find issue with that philosophy is that it doesn't teach your child the negotiation skills that they need for when they become adults. You're basically teaching them to be a yes man, and then they grow up and then they continue that same behavior. So they're not necessarily learning to advocate for themselves, learn to negotiate for all the things that they could be getting. And so as a parent, you want your child to negotiate with you, and you want to think of it as every single negotiation my child has with me, they're strengthening that skill set, so that when they leave home and they get a job or they go off to college or buy a house, buy a car, all those skills will come into play once they leave your nest. Right?
Yeah. Well, and developmentally, I would say we talk about parenting sort of 0 to 10 as the parent being the captain of the ship, which means I'm in charge and I'm making the decisions. It doesn't mean that I can't offer you choice along the way, but it's still, I'm making the policy and you're following the policy. The task of parenting 10 to 20 is to say, I am your wise guide. I am walking alongside you. you are making decisions and are driving your own ship. So instead of being the captain of the ship, I'm now like the admiral of the fleet, and I'm going to, it's like driving a car. You cannot have a kid drive a car short of them sitting in the driver's seat and having their
Right.
hands on the wheels, and they're like there's just no physical way to do it. And we get that as much as we might be dying trying to like take over the wheel, or like pressing our foot into the ground trying to break an imaginary brake. But that's really where we should be with all of our skills with our kids. That 2021, somewhere around in there, they are fully independent adults. And this is a slightly different topic, but I'm just going to mention it as a side topic because the negotiating piece is a part of that training, as you say. And in the same way that we scaffold the conversation about screen time and what's it going to be and what can the consequence be and where are our limits, I really think that we should look at all areas of a teen's life and say, how are we going to remove the scaffolding so that you're taking responsibility for all those things yourself, including your screen time? And, Alice, when we have provided such, like we talk about like providing the guardrails, but when the guardrails are like here, that a kid can't do anything,
Right.
they haven't had to exercise any of the muscle themselves that
Right.
says they're not listening to their body, they're not observing their own behavior, they're not giving any problem solving thought to what's good, what helps my life, where does screen time serve me, where is it fun, where is it constructive, where is it destructive. And you hear these stories of young people who show up at college and they just get sucked down a hole of a woman who started, what did she start? It's not Screen Strong, I don't think. Anyway, she went to pick up her son from after his finals, and he hadn't taken a single final, and she found him in his bed with like food wrappers all around him, and he had just been gaming for basically the whole semester and not participating. That's a pretty high cost
Yes.
of not
Yes.
of not figuring this stuff out ahead of time.
Yeah, I always like to think of it as, when they're growing up in your house, it's the best place for them to be making mistakes because you're their net. You can catch them and you can allow them to make the mistakes and allowing them to make bad decisions because the consequences are usually significantly less than when you become an adult and make
Yeah.
bad decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And
Exactly.
so I always think it's great to say, you know what, go ahead and make all the bad decisions you want as a teenager because you're going to learn. And even like, I was just, lightly pressuring my son to get his college essays done by the deadline, but like much sooner, right? And I kept saying, you need to do it sooner. You need to do it sooner. And he kept saying, don't worry, I got it. I've got Thanksgiving holidays. I'm going to do it. So he got it in on the day of the deadline. And then he said to me, Mom, I really wish I had done them a lot sooner because that would have given me time to pass them out to people that I know and they could have reviewed it and I could have
Yeah.
had dad review it and they could have given me feedback and I could have edited a little bit more. But that is something that he would not have learned if he and I were just fighting and fighting and fighting all along and I ended up forcing him to do it early. He would just be
Yes.
resentful and whatnot. But now, okay, so great. He submitted them. We don't know what will happen. But guess what? Now he has this lesson that he's learned for college essays and college homework and deadlines that are going to be
Yep.
coming up where he's going to think to himself, you know what? I remember what happened when I turned things in on the day of the deadline. I didn't really have a good chance to like go and have other people look at it and give me feedback.
Yep.
So hopefully
Yep.
that is a lesson that he'll take with him. And I think that is far more valuable than having me pressure him to get it done 2 weeks earlier and he doesn't learn any lesson except, oh, mom is a jerk. She forced me to do something when I could have done
Yeah.
it my way. Right?
And let's add the caveat that the American education system is very forgiving, right? Because maybe he doesn't get into any of the colleges that he really wants to get into, and he goes to a college that he's less interested in going to. And Maybe, he goes the first semester and then he's home over winter break and he's listening to stories from people who have gone to the colleges that he thought he maybe wanted to go to. And now he's like, wow, I really messed up. I really missed out on that. I want to do that. Well, there's an admissions office. Now you'll go in as a transfer student. Go see if that's possible and what does it look like. And because we have a pretty flexible system, it is much more likely, right? There is much more flexibility, and there are a lot of ways to meet our goals in the end. But in that case, it would all be coming from him.
Exactly.
And so you're right? So that he can still have that experience. He just might not have it freshman year or first semester.
I think the lessons that you learn making your own mistakes like really stick with you a lot longer than things like you said, like the story of the woman whose child went to school. If you are living your child's life for them, then when you release them, they don't know how to live their own lives and how to make the good choices because they haven't had the experience of making good and bad choices because you have made all the choices for them. And so you really want to, hone their negotiation skills. And like you said, even, there's age appropriate negotiation, like you said about, you've got to put some clothes on to go to school when you're 5 years old. But one of the really wonderful things about negotiation is you take those same negotiation skills and you apply them, whether you're applying them to another adult or a 5-year-old, and you can say, hey, look, do you want to put on the yellow socks or the purple socks, right? So the same thing happens when you're an adult. You basically offer two choices, right? If dentist, you can say, okay, we have to go to the dentist. Let's say you're 17 years old and they're like, I don't really want to go. You say, okay, but we have a root canal. So you have a couple of choices. You can go to the dentist and take care of this even though you don't want to go to the dentist, or we can stay here and you can continue to be in more and more pain, right? And so even though it sounds like a different scenario, it's still a choice scenario. You're making
and that is absolutely, like, that's my point as a parenting coach. I was teaching middle school, and then I didn't immediately start working with middle school parents. I wanted to work with the parents of the 2-3-year-olds because it's the same skill, right? It's purple sock, yellow sock for your 3-year-old. And would you like to walk the dog first or do your math first for the 13-year-old? Yeah, yes. Exactly. And then, and I will say that, when we can always layer in the question of what's your plan for? Like, what's your plan for getting off of your device easily?
Yes. Giving
so
them the
now we have
option
that critical
to
thinking
research.
piece.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I like that because it forces them to think and it forces them to resolve the issue. Right?
Yes, yeah. And I think in general, when we are negotiating with kids, we end the conversation too soon.
Absolutely.
Right? Like we think it's like, okay, so an hour and a half, right? Yeah, right. Okay, good. That is not an agreement.
Not only that, I think that all of us can do better at asking deeper and deeper questions of our kids. It's really a great way to help your teenager open up to you by showing, first of all, let me just say that when you're talking to your teenager, try not to talk to them with any judgment, because if you show up with judgment, that is why your teenager is not speaking to you. So if you show up and you're like, oh, you're always making bad decisions, or I don't like any of your friends, or any of those things, turn those thoughts off, because those thoughts are actively preventing your teen from opening up to you because
100%.
they feel the judgment, right?
Yeah.
And so if you go with curiosity and you say, okay, so I'm curious, like what makes you think, 2 hours is a good amount for you? Or what is the reason that you'd like, to be on screen time for 2 hours? Or just really digging in deep, because they might say something like, well, there's a game that I play and we do 2 rounds of it, and each round is, an hour and 15 minutes. And so therefore I need this amount of time. And you actually learn more information about them. You learn more information about what they're passionate about and the way they think, right? Their critical thinking skills. You're like, oh, I didn't realize that you thought like that. So you can really learn a lot about the inner workings of your child's mind if you show up without judgment and with open curiosity.
Yes, curiosity is one of my other favorite words. And active listening, I you have to remind people active listening is about information gathering. It is not about running arguments in your head, running counter arguments in your head. I always think about it like when you think about a satellite, like the dish at Stanford. There are some satellites which send out signals. There are a lot of satellites that just receive signals, and all they do is they get the data. All they do is they're collecting the data, and the data goes somewhere and it gets analyzed at some other time by people over there. But all it's doing is receiving the data. And that's what, I like to think of as active listening. It's like, okay, I'm the satellite, I'm connected, or I'm directed towards you, and we're just going to get all the information. That's all my job is to do right now. And so I'm going to prompt for more information. Uh-huh. Okay. Tell me more. Uh-huh. Okay, that sounds important. What else?
Right.
What else do you need me to know about this? What else can you tell me about this? Okay.
And it's also good to try to repeat back what it is that you think you heard, because frequently, if you are in your mind with your own thoughts, you're going to get that message garbled. And so when you're repeating it back, it's not going to be 100% accurate, right? You might assume that there's some feelings that are not there. You might assume that there's some facts in there that are not there. So at least if you can repeat back, okay, and you were doing it earlier, Elizabeth, when you said, let me make sure I understand what you're saying, right? You win the negotiation with the
Yeah.
with the child. So
Yeah.
and you do it more like just sort of intuitively because you've been doing this work for so long. But so for the parents out there, you want to make sure you say, okay, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that you feel like this because of this, you would like this
Yes.
because of that, and repeat it all back because you want to make sure that your teenager can say back to you, yes, mom or dad, that is what I was trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Now they're starting to feel like they're seen and heard. So now we're actually like working towards really clear communication because now they've spoken, you've repeated it back. They feel like, yes, you've listened to me, you've heard me, you get where I'm coming from, and now it's easier to try to communicate. Now, if you come back and you have all kinds of judgment and, accusations, that is like closing the
Or
door in your
even good
teen's face.
ideas.
Yeah.
Right? Even right, it's let's ascribe well-meaning to us ourselves. Like we are well-meaning when we come up with a good idea. They don't need it.
No.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
not interested in that. So just try to make them
Right.
be the expert because
Yes.
they are the experts in their lives and their
They
feelings.
are.
And so you want to really show up with that attitude because that attitude will help you like really create a deep and meaningful relationship with your teenager because obviously like you said the 0 to 10 is when you're the leader and it's very difficult for our parents to switch over to that mentoring position after 10, and many of them because they're not doing a good job they feel like, oh, I don't really know my kid, they're distancing themselves from me and I'm not really sure how to interact with them anymore, we're not as close as we used to be. So these are the sort of like things that people complain about. It's because you haven't been able to successfully navigate that leader position to mentor position, right?
Yeah.
As you talked about captain to
Yeah.
admiral, right?
Right.
So,
And part of
yeah,
that shift is holding this delicate balance between being willing to be a little bit uncomfortable and at the same time being willing to still be the guardrail. And it's hard. It's hard to find that balance. I was talking to a parent this week who's they were on a family vacation in Italy, and he was disappearing in the night. He's just turned 17, and you know going all over Rome and hanging out with other people and disappearing in the night. And that's a really borderline kind of thing because there are certainly 17-year-olds who can handle that and for whom that is an appropriate choice. And at the same time, it's super understandable that these parents would be freaked out. They don't know Rome. They don't speak Italian. They're, other than being able to track the phone, right? They really don't know what's going on. And So I said, in the short run, I think I would make the argument of saying you're on a family vacation. And so it's about being together as a family. And that while he may be old enough and responsible enough to go out and have these experiences, this is not the time, maybe. And, could they come to some agreements about what future opportunity he would like to have? And maybe some acknowledgement that in planning this trip, we didn't really take into account how old and mature you are. And we were still kind of trip planning for you as if you were a younger child. And that's on us. And we apologize for that.
Right. Yes. I think that owning your own faults, showing up with your own vulnerabilities goes a long way, because when your child can see you for who you are, someone with faults, someone with insecurities, someone with vulnerabilities, then they can also start to relate to you more on a human level. Right? And so, for example, when my kids are coming home, like they both drive now. I've got a 16-year-old and a 20-year-old, and they're driving all over the place. And so if they don't come back home, like around the time that I expect them to come back home, I'm usually calling them. Well, they don't really see me as like controlling, because I explain to them, hey, I'm just worried that you might be in a car accident. So I'm just trying to like make myself feel a little bit calmer by making sure that if you're running late, you haven't gotten into an accident. So now, because they understand that this is not me trying to control them, but this is me just feeling worried, they usually either pick up the phone and they're like, hey, I'm on my way, don't worry, I'll be back. Or they might call me and say, I'm late, but I'm just letting you know. So because they understand that this is not
Yes.
mom trying to control their whereabouts, but this is just mom worried for another human being's safety.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so
Yes.
I'm showing up with that vulnerability. And so it's easier to negotiate like boundaries, because they are understanding why I'm asking for what I'm asking for.
Yeah. And one of the ways I handle those conversations is I'll say something like, obviously, if you were living outside my house, I would not be keeping track of when you were coming home at night. I would be going to bed, but you are living at my house. And so, I still do feel like there's a responsibility to make sure that you get home safely. And so when you're not coming home around the time I expect you, I can't go to bed and go to sleep. And that's a problem. What could we do to solve that problem?
Exactly.
Right?
And
And
just zip
being
it.
quiet after you ask that question is really super important. Because
Yep.
ideally, they're going to come up with the like, well, mom, would it make you feel better if what if I just texted you and told you, gave you a status report at where I was?
Yep. Exactly. Well, this has
Right.
been awesome, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming on the show and helping parents talk about negotiating with their kids, giving them strategies. I think that was fabulous. And if anyone wanted to contact you to work with you, Elizabeth, how can they reach you?
My website is my name. So www.elisabethstitt.com. That's Elizabeth with an S, and Stitt is Stitt. So that really is the easiest place, because my phone number and my email and my contact form are all right there. And I do a getting to know you call, complimentary call. So if there's, you're thinking, oh, I kind of have, boy, it would be great to talk through some of these issues and to have a sounding board for some of these things. The getting to know you call is the perfect opportunity for me to help evaluate, to hear about it and evaluate, do I think I'm a good fit? And then if yes, then I can share how I structure things in the different programs I run.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so if you have kids and you're wanting some guidance, please contact Elizabeth and she'll be able to help you. She's a fabulous parenting coach. And listeners, thank you again for listening on Negotiation with Alice. Until next time.